Any utility that is wanting to prepare for climate change, it's necessary for them to understand and look at their system as a whole, and to understand how is climate change going to affect stress or impair my ability to deliver my services. So you can perform stress tests, you can develop different plausible future climate scenarios using climate data or other means, and use those scenarios to test how will your system perform, how will it respond to these different conditions. What are the vulnerabilities that are existing vulnerabilities that may be amplified by these different types of scenarios, new vulnerabilities that are identified. And in addition, you can also begin to identify what are some adaptation options, some operational changes that you could deploy to address those new or amplified vulnerabilities, and essentially begin to simulate. Climate change is going to play out differently in different parts of the world, right? And so there's not necessarily a common set of directions or guidance on what to do. Each utility is going to need to be prepared for and understand how is climate change likely to manifest itself in the areas in which you operate, right? And so a utility needs to be thinking about how those extreme conditions are likely to manifest itself in the areas in which they operate, and testing their system against those extreme conditions, right? And this is where it's really useful to build in and tap into the tacit knowledge that utility operators have of their system. Most of them understand the nuances of their system and how different conditions affect the nature of their distribution system. And also, historical data can be really useful in that regard. I think digital twins are a great mechanism to enable the stress testing of your system. It's not necessarily the only way, but it's certainly a really useful way to do that. And KTM is a great example of a platform that enables the creation of those digital twins and to run simulations of your system in this digital environment in a safe place, right? Not a real world place in a way, and run different scenarios, right? Scenarios that represent plausible future conditions under climate change, and see how your system performs, right? I think that's a crucial component for utilities, is to build that digital muscle that is going to be essential for utilities to leverage their network, the copious amounts of data that many of them have, and begin to aggregate that into a platform that enables them to sort of see conditions left to right for real-time operations, but also begin to simulate future conditions so they can prepare accordingly, either reflecting that into capital planning, reflecting that into operational planning, and the like. Utilities are an infrastructure-intensive sector, and they often make investments that have long lives, that design lives that may be 30, 40 years or plus, but effective operational lives that often can be longer. And so there's probably a predisposition to think about adaptation to climate change in the context of how to manage and change and invest in new infrastructure. And that will need to be part of the solution set. But there's other levers to push, right? What are some of the financial levers? Are there financial tools that can be used to help to manage customer behavior? How can you think about the landscape as part of your solution set, and particularly for urban utilities, the urban landscape, which is often hard form, right? Can you begin to leverage land use decisions in a manner, given the connection between land use and water, in a way that eases the burden on adaptation and increases the flexibility and capacity of your system. And that really begins to potentially take utilities out of their comfort zone, where they're focused on, I have a system and I need to manage my system, and start to think about a system that's within a broader set of systems, and how might I influence that broader set of systems in order to make the management of my more direct system easier and more flexible and adaptable. I think climate change has this potential to really transform the utility sector in terms of how they have traditionally approached their work. And that is, I think, in some ways kind of exciting for the utility sector. Obviously, the challenges going forward are incredibly daunting, but it is an opportunity to help utilities rethink their role, right? Their role in their communities and how they might access other systems and influence other systems in order to make their job a little bit easier. You know, in the climate space, there's a lot of discussion about decision making under uncertainty. Some even say deep uncertainty. And sort of at the heart of that is the notion that trying to predict the future is not what you should be doing, but rather being prepared for and acknowledging that the future is unknowable, and making decisions that embed as much flexibility into your decision-making process, so you're not sort of on a path-dependent, you don't make path-dependent choices. You're embedding as much flexibility as you can for future decision makers, so that if conditions manifest themselves in ways that are much different than the assumptions that you made, that you have options to adjust and course correct. It's pretty hard to do that with hard infrastructure, right? So that's going to be one of the challenges for the utility sector, and this is where you start to try and feather in different strategies, different levers to push that are complementary to hard infrastructure, and build in that flexibility to make adjustments over time. And it's also likely about that sort of that look ahead as you begin to prepare for 30, 40, 50 years down the road, is anticipating what sort of flexibility would you want to have 10 years from now.
KTM.